Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're listening to Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
So, on today's episode of Eating W's, we have our predictions for 3 of the biggest booms and 3 of the biggest busts from the first round of this year's NFL draft. Now, this is one of my favorite things about the draft, is looking at who is in that middle area, that risky area, who just totally becomes a bust, and who's in that risky area that just goes off for their teams. It happens every year. It's as sure as death and taxes that there's going to be booms and busts in the NFL draft. So it's so fun to kind of try to predict and scout who's going to be which.
These are guys with high ceilings and low floors, and it's just trying to find out who hits the top and who hits the bottom.
Exactly. So we'll just jump right into it. So starting with the boom candidates, I'll start off, and I got Purdue edge rusher George Karlaftis. Now, we were just talking about this a bunch in yesterday's episode, that each position in this class is so deep, especially in positions like receiver, corner, and edge rusher. And I think it is especially deep in edge rusher. And George Karlaftis is a guy who is very fluid on where he could go in the first round of this year's draft. I've seen where he's mocked as high as like top 10, 12 to the Vikings I've seen before, and I've seen where he's not even mocked in the first round, where he falls out of the first round. I think he's going to end up going in that middle of the mid to late, maybe closer to the late side of the first round, but he is going to be an absolute beast. This guy doesn't have quite the size or the physical traits as some of the other edge rushers in this draft, but man, he just has heart. He's got such a motor. And one of my favorite things is he can very easily do it both. Sometimes you see edge rushers who can just rush the passers, or you see more true defensive ends who are good in the run game. This guy does both just because he works so damn hard. You can tell he watches films. He's just always in the right place at the right time, and I love to see guys like that. So I think George Karlaftis is going to boom in the NFL.
This is a first round talent. It might fall to the second round. And that's what I mean. I was talking about yesterday about a non-first rounder winning defensive rookie of the year. Karlaftis could be one of those guys.
Most certainly. I really like George Karlaftis.
Mm-hmm. So for my first boom is probably the most intriguing guy in this draft, the quarterback Malik Willis out of Liberty. And I think he has some biggest boom potential because he's the most athletic and he has the biggest arm. But one thing is that he is the biggest project of this whole draft. He needs to sit a year to truly adjust to the speed of the game and the competition, and to truly develop into that complete quarterback with the NFL coaching and NFL conditioning.
This man is the biggest boom or bust potential guy I can remember. He has probably one of the biggest upsides overall in this NFL draft. And he also probably has one of the lowest floors overall in this year's draft. It is insane, the range of how good this guy can be. And whoever takes the risk on him, most likely in the first round, just better hope that his floor is up here instead of way down there, because there's a chance it is. So moving on to my second boom candidate, I got Minnesota tackle Daniel Falah. Now, the main reason I have this guy as a boom candidate is just because of his size. He is an absolute beast of a human being. I want to say he's like almost 7 foot and easily over 300 pounds. I can't remember the exact stuff, but it is just insane how big this man is. And you almost don't even have to be that athletic when you're that big, but he is. He's much quicker than a lot of people would expect, and he absolutely wrecked shop at the Senior Bowl. Now, it's kind of risky calling this guy a first round, because to be honest, I think it's almost more likely at this point that he does fall to the second round. But there's a very good chance that he can fall into that 30, 31, 32 pick, especially with the Bengals there picking at 31 and needing so much O-line help overall, even though tackle is one of their stronger positions on the O-line. But this guy does have a chance to go in the first round, and I think even if he does slip to the second, he will still be a steal and a boom for whichever team gets him.
Yeah, definitely. I know that he did really, like you're saying, did really well at the Senior Bowl. He's been really featured for his size. He's just huge and super athletic.
Yep, he's just like Bernard Raymond. He's one of the foreign guys. I want to say Raymond is from Australia and Daniel Falah is from Austria. So It's hard to keep those two apart with Austria and Australia, but
I think it's the other way around.
Is it? It might be. I'm not sure on that.
I think Raymond's from.
We'll pop it right here.
Yep, when we find out.
Yep.
But I think that Raymond's from Austria and Falah is from Australia.
I can't remember for sure. I know it's one way or the other. But so, Callan, who is your second candidate?
So my second one is kind of similar to Falah. Is that he is a late first round, early second projection, but he has been in first round projections, and that's David Ojabo, who unfortunately had that Achilles injury and will probably miss the first half of the season. But because of that, I think he'll be a late bloomer and could have a really huge impact as a late season injury return for the team that drafts him. Now he had 11 sacks and 12 tackle for losses in his 1 year starting last year for Michigan. That is really high productivity for only a short sample size. But I think that if he can come in and just be a pure pass rusher to finish out the end of the season, that could be a huge, huge impact on the team that drafts him.
Yeah, this guy was going to be a mid-first round guy, and then of course had that huge injury, which you just hate to see. But now I agree. I don't think he does go in the first round at this point with that injury, and if he does, it's very, very late. Mm-hmm. But he's going to be an absolute steal for whoever picks him up in the second round. And if he can come off that injury all good, which with today, what they know about medicine and injuries and stuff, I'm sure he will more than be able to come off the injury fine. He's going to be a good player in the NFL, I agree. He's very, very fast, and I like that about him. So, for my final boom candidate, I'm going to put my Sam Howell fanboy shirt back on and give it to my boy Sam Howell, quarterback out of UNC. Now, something that a lot of people forget about Howell, he was a Heisman finalist last year. Like, this guy can ball out. And I know you can look at this as a pro or a con. He had a lot of NFL talent around him. He had 2 now starting NFL running backs and 2 wide receivers get drafted last year. And I think even maybe an offensive lineman get drafted last year. So you've seen what he can do when he has talent around him. Because he had little to no talent around him this year. He absolutely carried that UNC offense, and he did it well. He still balled out. He had to almost fully change his game to really rely on the rushing attack because he had very little time and inexperienced receivers. But he took that change and he made it a positive and had, I want to say, almost like 1,000 rushing yards. He had a hell of a season on the ground and still did okay through the air. So someone who can adjust like that, he can work with carrying a team, or he can work where he has a good team around him. You just love to see that. And again, very risky saying this is a first-round guy, but I think there's a good possibility he falls into a 32. I mean, it seems like a quarterback always gets picked there at 32, someone jumping back into the first round. So I could see someone taking him there, a team trading up and taking him, or maybe even the Detroit Lions taking him. I think this guy is so much better than a lot of people are giving him credit for. And I'm not going to say he's going to be as good as Josh Allen, but I could see him having a very Josh Allen-esque glow-up once he gets some NFL coaching and fixes his throwing mechanics up a little bit.
I mean, the only thing I think about is that he went to UNC, and the last UNC quarterback came out was Trubisky.
I
think he tainted the name.
I almost hate to say it. He has a very similar play style to Mitchell Trubisky. But I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad play style necessarily. So I just think, as you said, Mitchell Trubisky kind of tainted that idea of saying he has a play style like Mitchell Trubisky.
Right, and being a UNC quarterback.
Exactly. So, Callan, who is your final boom?
So my final boom guy is Treylon Burks, the wide receiver from Arkansas. Now, he's not the greatest route runner, and that's why he's fallen down draft boards a little bit, but he has an amazing yard after catch ability, and he can be very vital to an offense in the right role. Kind of a role kind of like that Cordero Patterson, where he can be that running back wide receiver. Just get the ball in his hands, and he's able to produce.
I totally agree. I think Treylon Burks will be that next guy to kind of step up and take that role. You know, Patterson 2 years ago, a little bit even in Atlanta, and especially last year, and then Debo really revolutionized the wide receiver position and showed that they can do both of that. I mean, even like the Lions with a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown did a little bit, and it even worked with him having that smaller build. So it's kind of cool to see that a lot of different receivers and a lot of different build and skill sets are able to do it. And I think Treylon Burks will be the next guy to step in and do it. It kind of reminds me of DK. He's built.
Yeah.
If you look at Treylon Burks, he's huge. He's big.
That helps with his yards after catch.
Definitely.
He's
So I really like Treylon Burks. I totally agree that he will boom. So now we'll jump into the bust candidates, guys who we don't think will do quite as well as people are giving them credit for. And Callan, I'll let you start with that one.
So I'll start. My first bust candidate is Kayvon Thibodeaux, the edge rusher out of Oregon. Now, his big knock on him is that he has been taking plays off while at Oregon. And he's even admitted to leaving sacks on the field due to getting a stalemate on blocks, and he needs to work on that. So that was an actual quote from him, and I don't like to hear that you're getting stalemated by college offensive linemen, and that you're almost admitted to taking plays off. He didn't admit to it, but he basically said that about, with the whole being stalemated. And I mean, somebody with that much talent and potential shouldn't be stalemated by a college left or right tackle, I believe.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I almost look at that the opposite way a little bit. It takes a big man to go on a national stage and admit that he needs to get better there, and he knows that that's happening.
Where his weaknesses are.
And same with Derek Stingley Jr. He's kind of in that same boat. I don't know how much I agree with that taking plays off being such a negative thing, because of course it is a negative, but some people are so bad with it. But these guys already know they're getting drafted. They already know they're top first round guys. So, they're just trying to not get injured. I hate to see it. I'd rather see a guy go 100% all out no matter what, but I don't think it's quite as big of a red flag as some people are saying. So
it is what people did say about Rashawn Gary, and obviously he's turned out to be doing pretty well. I think he's going to really break out next year, but it's just still never a good thing to hear coming out that you were taking plays off, kind of gives up on the team kind of a message.
Yep. So now moving on to my first bust candidate. I was so happy when I heard Callan had this guy in his boom candidate, because I even said it a little bit ago. He is the definition of boomer bust. So for my first guy, I have Liberty quarterback Malik Willis. I can't get behind him. I'm not going to lie. When we watched his pro day, Callan can even attest, I was impressed. I thought he did very well at his pro day. His accuracy kind of worried me, but he was very consistent, very accurate, great ball placement on his pro day. But there's still so many factors that still just are huge red flags for me. He struggled to anticipate throws. He struggled to read defenses and kind of relied on his legs a little bit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're a runner like Malik Willis is. But you just hate to see that from the quarterback position. And the biggest thing being he played at Liberty. He never really faced elite talent, in my opinion. So that's a big adjustment for going into the NFL. So I'd like to see him do really well, but I can't get behind him still. Not yet, at least.
Yeah, I think he's going to do really well.
Yeah.
I've been a supporter and fan of him for a while now.
I mean, throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks pretty much with Malik Willis, because it's about a 50-50 chance on whether he becomes a upper echelon NFL quarterback or a draft bust. It's crazy. So, Callan, who is your second guy?
So you mentioned my second draft bust, and I believe it'll be Derek Stingley. And that's just because he kind of peaked his freshman year. He had his best season his freshman year, low productivity since then. His main stat that seems to carry him is that he allowed an NCAA low 30% completion percentage. Well, that was only that he was thrown on 30 times. It's a really small sample size for such a good-looking number. And I just don't think that that's going to transpire well in the NFL. The fact that, like I said, that he kind of did his best his freshman year, and he's kind of gone downhill ever since, especially as other talent around him has departed for the NFL and succeeded, he kind of tallied down.
Yeah. If your sample size is only 30 times being thrown at, you should never use
Right.
that stat. But no, I agree. I like how you said he peaked his freshman year, because it's kind of exactly what happened. I mean, if he was able to declare for the draft his freshman year, he's probably practically like a number 1 overall pick. He killed it his freshman year, and then totally kind of, not gonna say fell off the map, but just had a huge drop in play and production, in effort. And a big thing that really got him was the injury bug. He could not stay healthy those last 2 years. So, like I said, the effort thing isn't really a huge red flag for me, but what is a huge red flag for me is the injury thing. If you're getting injured that often in college, the NFL's a lot more. I don't know if you're going to be able to handle the NFL. So I hope the best for Stingley, because sadly I think the Vikings are probably going to draft him at 12. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So, man, I hope he becomes a boom candidate. But I agree with that one. I think especially more than Kayvon Thibodeaux, who, as I mentioned, is in a very similar situation to him. I think he's much more likely to bust. But LSU can produce some good corners. They've produced good corners in the past.
They've produced some bad ones, too, though.
Yeah, that's true.
No
That's true. You
Claiborne.
gotta take the good with the bad. So. For my second bust candidate, I have running back from Iowa State, Breezy Hall. Now, my biggest thing with him is just, he kind of had a little bit of the injury stuff too, but coming out of Iowa State, being a receiving back, receiving backs aren't really a centerpiece thing in the NFL. It's hard to really succeed as a receiving back. And don't get me wrong, I mean, guys like Christian McCaffrey have, and Breezy Hall isn't just a receiving back. I understand that he can be a 3-down guy. But I've just seen a lot of running backs who lean on being able to catch out in the backfield, definitely make splashes and big plays in the NFL, but never really be able to be consistent guys. You know, one that pops up in my head is a guy like Tariq Cohen from the Bears, who his big thing was injury. I mean, he's been out with hamstring injury or something, ACL, I believe, for the past 2 years pretty much. It just makes me nervous.
Got beat up.
He did. It just makes me nervous when those guys come in and lean out of catching out of the backfield so much, when they should be more all-around running backs.
Yeah, you know, it's a fine art, the receiving back. There's only a few that have really mastered it. McCaffrey, Marshall Faulk, Kevin Faulk both come to mind. You know, so it's a hard art to master, and for it to be the one that you hang your hat on, I mean, you better be pretty darn good at it.
Yep, exactly.
So for my final bust, I have potential first overall pick, Trayvon Walker. And this guy has just, I mean, he's skyrocketed since the Combine. The Combine did everything that it possibly could for him. And his rise is similar to that of other draft busts like Solomon Thomas and Dante Fowler, who, though have been decent NFL players, didn't quite live up to the potential that is the 3rd and 5th overall pick, respectively. And this guy is looking at as a possible 1st or 2nd overall pick. So you really got to try to hit a home run with those picks. And I don't know if this guy's a home run. I mean, his PFF edge score was only an 80, which compared to Aiden Hutchinson, he was a 95. So, and he was Trayvon Walker was number 6 out of all the edge rushers that were scored. His score was 6 overall.
Interesting.
So I don't know if he's going to be that great of a pick, especially getting compared to Solomon Thomas and Dante Fowler. That's just not good comparisons to start out.
Yeah, Trayvon Walker is one of those guys where if you look at his testing scores, his body, stuff like that, he has all the tools you can possibly imagine. He's a huge guy, he's very tall, but he's still fast, he can get to the quarterback, he can stop the run. But there's so many things about him, little tiny inconsistency, little tiny red flags that you see, that I agree he could be a bust. I think he's going to be more of a middle of the pack guy. I think he's going to fall smack dab in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you're taking that guy first overall, you're really looking for that boom. Smack dab in the middle isn't really good enough for the first overall pick. So we'll see where he actually ends up on draft day, because it could still vary so much between now and draft day.
Right, there's still a number of days, so anything could happen.
So for the final candidate overall of this video, and my final bust candidate, I'm keeping it on the defensive line. I got Jordan Davis, defensive tackle out of Georgia. Very similar to Trayvon Walker. Of course, they both went to Georgia, and they both absolutely skyrocketed up draft boards after an insane combine performance. Jordan Davis is the guy who ran under 5 seconds at 3:41 and all that crazy stuff, had the longest broad jump for a defensive tackle. One thing that really makes me nervous about him is he's never gotten a chance to be a 3-down defensive tackle. Now, of course, at a place like Georgia, and especially with that amazing defense they had last season, of course he wasn't. He was a rotational guy because they had so many great players that they could have rotated him in with. So I'm not saying that I don't think he's conditioned enough or anything like that. That's a big guy to go from never being a 3-down guy in college to being only a 3-down guy in the NFL, moving up a level and playing more snaps. It just kind of makes me nervous. So I don't think he's going to be awful by any means. I think even a bust for him is still a pretty decent guy and just a space eater in the middle of the defensive line. I think he'd thrive in a 3-4. I've said that a few times before. But I could see Jordan Davis not living up to the hype that he has gotten these past few weeks.
Yeah, in my notes I put, after all the Trayvon Walker stuff, I put Jordan Davis, ditto.
Yeah,
it's about the same thing. He's a combine superstar who is skyrocketing up draft boards just because of his combine performance. And I think I said this before the combine. There's always guys that overperform and someone becomes a darling to them, and just because of their testing numbers at the combine. Now, anything they did on the field, just to what they did at the combine. And it seems like these are the two big ones to come out of the combine this year.
Exactly. Super teams always make me nervous. People coming from super teams like that Georgia defense that was just absolutely insane, or this is kind of a bad example for saying it makes me nervous, but that LSU offense a few years ago with guys like Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, I say that's a bad example because, of course, those guys are all stars in the NFL now. But it just makes me nervous when you have so much talent around you to kind of see how you would do when it becomes just you instead of all that stacked players.
Thaddeus Moss was never able to catch on.
Yeah, so exactly.
And I was surprised by that. That's Randy Moss's son.
Oh, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is out of an LSU team, and hasn't really been
had a good start.
He's been a middle of the pack guy, to say the least. But so it's kind of when there's so many great players and so much talent in that one condensed area, it's hard to tell who's really there. Because to add on to why it's a bad example, you got to look at the offensive coordinator of that LSU offense, Joe Brady, who went to the NFL and just totally flopped with the Panthers. So that showed that the talent was carrying him a little more than anything. But those are Cal and I's prediction for some boom and bust candidates. Keep watching next week when Cal and I each will put out our final mock draft before the official NFL draft, which will be next Thursday, the 28th. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.